brought to you by Mint Mobile. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Jouar, and today is Friday, December 8th, 2023, and I've got the excellent Quinn of Snazzy Labs here with me. Hi, Quinn. How are you?
Hello, I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
I'm so excited you said yes, because, you guys are all busy. You were so awesome about it. So lots of big news this week, actually. We've got the Cybertruck.
Yeah.
I'm sure we both have a mouthful on that. And then we have Beeper Mini, which I think I kind of want to really nerd out. My audience is pretty tech savvy, so I really want to take a bit of a gander into your video details here. And then OnePlus 12, simply because, this whole Chinese phone's coming out 3 months before the US. Oh man, such a pain, right?
Yeah.
But then we have a bunch of other minor rapid fire news to go through.
Sure.
Cybertruck. So it's real now. How do you feel about that?
So they say. Yeah. I mean, it's exciting to see it's finally here. I was actually at the unveiling event back in 2019.
Oh, I didn't know that. Cool.
Yeah. So they, I don't know that they like me much anymore, but at the time they had invited me out as press to come see it. And I covered the unveiling, and then, kind of even in the video postulated, I don't know if this will ever become a thing. Because it's, especially at the time, it was so outlandish and different and new, and that's still the case, but it looks like it's, starting to be a thing.
Yeah, so, I'm about to write an article for Tech Radar. I write a bi-weekly column for them about kind of tech car and EV trends, right? And I wrote a story recently. It's funny because I kind of play both sides, and the audience gets really mad with me because sometimes I'm the Tesla stan, sometimes I'm the Tesla naysayer. The last article I wrote was, don't wait for the Cybertruck, buy a EV pickup now. There's lots of good choices. Well, lots. There's two good choices in my opinion. I didn't count the Hummer in there because it's kind of outlandish.
Yeah, it doesn't really exist either. They make,
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. So I give people my perspective on the Lightning and, the Rivian, right? So you have owned Teslas. I don't think you have one anymore, right? You're
I
done
do
now?
not. No.
And you are owning a Rivian, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So I purchased originally a Model 3 clear back in 2018. I had one of the first performance models that kind of came out of the Fremont factory.
Oh, wow.
And then I bought a Model Y because I was able to get out of my Model 3 during all of the kind of hysteria about used car pricing. Yeah. So I had a Model Y reservation that I never acted upon, and they sent me an email and said, "Hey, if you want this car, you got to take it. Otherwise, we're going to forfeit your reservation to someone else." And I was able to get one, I think, within 2 or 3 weeks at the time when, this was, I guess.
So you got an early production Model Y and also a relatively early production performance Model 3, right?
Mid-production Model Y, I would say. It was like mid-2021, probably.
Okay, so not June, that early. Okay.
Yeah, June kind of when I got it, I think. And that's when, they couldn't keep up with demand. Pricing was insane. And but it was right before pricing went totally nuts.
Right.
And I was able to get it for, I think, $10,000 more than I sold my Model 3 for. That was it.
It's exactly what happened to me.
4 years old or 50,000 miles. I mean, mine was not new, but everyone wanted them. So I couldn't not.
I started off with a original reservation Model 3. So I got the rear wheel drive long range.
Oh, okay.
I had that for 3 years. And then because I wanted to lease for my business, but I couldn't because early times they wouldn't let you. So I did a long loan on it, knowing that I was going to keep it the whole time. And then during COVID, I was like, the warranty is going to be up another year. I'm kind of want some of the new features, and I want an all-wheel drive model. So I looked into it, and I couldn't believe that Tesla was going to give me 10 grand more than the car was worth new.
Right.
So I traded it in for a 21 long range. I call it the stealth performance because it's a long range with the acceleration boost, right? So
that's
it's
what
actually
I had. Yep.
A really good combo.
The performance upgrade package or whatever they called it. Standard brakes, regular wheels.
Exactly. The brakes, I would love better brakes, but I like the fact that my sidewalls are a little taller, and it does look totally normal. And I do miss track mode, of course, but at the same time, it's almost as fast and it's quite a bit cheaper. And I still have it. It's leased until July next year. So that's kind of, we both have a history, which is what I'll let the audience know, right? Now, I've driven the Rivian R1T quad motor and I absolutely fell in love. I'm not a pickup truck person, but that thing is like the Swiss Army knife of cars. Like it does everything right. And I was blown away. And you have the truck or the SUV?
I've had both. I owned the truck originally and loved it, drove it for a year. I had a reservation for the SUV that I was going to just, let lapse because my wife originally I had gotten that for her. She wasn't really interested in that. But same deal. Rivian offered me more on trade-in than I paid for the car. So how do you not do that? So I ended up getting the R1S and I love it. I do miss a lot of the aspects of the truck, but it's, I've said it multiple times. I'll say it again. It's the best car I've ever owned. Full stop. It's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like if, I wasn't owning a Tesla, I'd be a Rivian, maybe a Lucid, or maybe one of the upcoming Chinese European brands, the Polestars or basically made by the Chinese. Because to me, and this is the article I just wrote on Tech Radar, like how phone makers are making EVs in China, right? Xiaomi and Huawei, and how car makers in China are making phones. Like the Polestar phone is the Meizu 21, and then, other things like that. And I'm about to write a story about the Cybertruck because, like, love it or hate it, there's a ton of technological advancement in that truck that nobody's talking about. And that's what, as a nerd and a car enthusiast both, is really exciting me, knowing what Tesla has delivered so far. Like, beyond the hype, yes, I hate the fact that this thing was overhyped to death. I really want, for once, Tesla to kind of surprise us with a car that's ready. Just ready. That's it.
Hey.
No Elon BS. Just give us that $25,000 car made at the Mexico Gigafactory. Make everybody happy. But he can't hold his mouth shut.
No, about anything. That's why I also am excited about the Cybertruck is it's been so long since they unveiled it and we had no information leading up to the event. And the event was, in the most Tesla way possible, a Tesla event, which provided us essentially no information. It was filled with gimmicks. I'm glad they did the press circuit, with a couple of YouTube channels and a couple of automotive journalists so that we could actually understand what was going on in the car. I've long said, and I agree with you, that for first-time EV buyers, I have almost always recommended a Tesla.
Same.
Just because they're so refined, and the stuff that Tesla does, they throw out convention and they throw out what traditional automakers think are necessary for an electric vehicle. And the end result is something that's more refined, something that's more reliable. And they have, more than a decade of experience mass producing electric cars, and everybody else is kind of just starting out. Now, that's not to say that there's not great options out there. I love my Rivian. But if you look at the kind of technological refinement in my car versus a Tesla, it's just not comparable. Tesla's a leg up on everybody else. And I think the Cybertruck just extends their lead that much further.
And that's kind of what I want to talk about, because look, I don't love the design, even though I have to say it's growing on me a little bit, but I haven't seen the production one in person, but I saw a release candidate in my neighborhood in San Francisco not too long ago. Yeah. The one that got towed, actually, but it got towed in a different neighborhood than my neighborhood. And unfortunately, it was one of those days, I was running errands. At the time, I had a Mercedes EQE AMG SUV to review, and I'm like, I don't have time. I need to take photos, blah, blah, blah. I'm running around. I'm like, I really need to stop and take photos of this thing. But I didn't. But in person, it surprised me how it's kind of like feels like somebody dropped an AR vehicle in the real world, but less so than a computer render, which is what it looks like in pictures. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
Because you get those reflections on the stainless steel from the environment. It's actually pretty cool.
Right.
But look, whether you listeners right now like this or not, whether you like Tesla or not, whether, we don't want to get into that. What I want to talk about is the tech, because as you said, it's so hard for me to explain to the average person, never mind the tech savvy people out there, how once you've experienced Tesla as a system, as an ecosystem, as a vertically integrated piece of technology, very much like what Apple does with their watch, their iPads and everything else, it makes so much sense that cars would be like that going forward. Yet the legacy car makers are just kind of stumbling with it. And even the startups having a hard time because it's really difficult. It's a challenge. And I think this is where I'm really impressed with the Chinese because they seem to be getting it. Yeah, and I think for them, it's driven by the fact that their Android phones are essentially customized for their ecosystems. You know, Xiaomi has its own iCloud equivalents and Huawei has its own Siri-like assistant. And so they're used to creating these vertical things, right? So what kind of impresses me the most is, you know, it's kind of the apex of where software-defined vehicles are right now with Tesla. And the Cybertruck inherits all of that, right? Like, sure, your Rivian is going to get supercharging next year, but is it going to be as slick and refined as the Tesla experience? Probably not, right?
No.
Now, the adapter, obviously, but even when they put an X port on there, it's not, I don't think, going to be quite there. And I had some software issues with Lucid, much more than Rivian. And, you know, you can tell, like, they really want to get to where Tesla is, but they don't know what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, you know, you got Mercedes and Ford and those guys. Again, really trying hard. But, man, you drive those cars and you're like, they're like 10 years behind, it feels like, or 5 years, in terms of software, right? And the integration.
Oh, yeah. In terms of powertrain, I mean, everything, even range with...
efficiency.
You know, with their heat pumps and their super manifolds and the way that repairability, and sometimes this comes at the cost of repairability and future usability, but oftentimes it doesn't. It simplifies the production. I mean, if you pull the front trunk liner out of a Tesla, out of a Model Y, and then you do it out of a Rivian, your head would explode because the Rivian, you've got spaghetti lines going everywhere and batteries, and Tesla's got like 3 things. It's super refined. And that's part of the reason why they're able to make such insane margins on their vehicles.
Right.
Is they have streamlined it down to a science, and everybody else is kind of just taking in old convention of, well, this is how you build a car, and now let's just slap an EV powertrain in it.
100%. And I'm glad you get it because, you know, there are a few specifics I want to talk about the Cybertruck. But before we do, one of the things I've been preaching in my Tech Radar stories about, you know, car trends and EVs and stuff is gigacastings are the future. And in the same way as direct to consumer dealer, or rather sales, making without dealerships and markups and franchising is the future, I think body shops and insurance companies are going to have to reinvent themselves in this future of gigacasting because it's not going away. And because the Cybertruck right now is really expensive because it's the early days, I expect that thing to fly down in price in the next few years, assuming they get serious about mass production in the sense that they did with Model 3 and Model Y, right? But it has the potential, and that's one thing I want to talk about. The other thing I want to talk about is, and this is I'm still not 100% sure on this. It's very controversial, but I feel that in the same way as you don't mirror with CarPlay or Android Auto your phone to your iPad screen, right? You log into the Apple ecosystem on your iPad, and now you have an experience that fits into the Apple ecosystem. In that sense, I feel the right way to do software in a car is not to mirror your phone. Is to create an integrated ecosystem that works with either Android or Apple's ecosystem in the West, because that's the only choices we get.
Sure.
But that adds a bit of flavor. Like Nothing Phone 2 supports Tesla integration via Tesla APIs without having to install the Tesla app. You can put quick settings that immediately affect your Tesla's behavior, like opening the front and stuff, right in the quick settings of the home screen, right?
Sure.
That stuff is kind of where I think we should be heading. And I think Tesla could do a better job. Right now, I still feel that Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are a crutch because most people haven't experienced a good software system in a car. What are your thoughts?
That's absolutely true. I think as opposed to, and part of the problem is that, and it makes sense if you look at Google and you look at Apple and their software engineering prowess. This is another reason, by the way, why Tesla has killed it is A lot of traditional automakers just figured building an electric car is easy. Internal combustion engines are infinitely more complex. You stick a battery, you stick a motor, you stick a coolant loop, and there you go. Your EV is built. But that's not the case.
No.
You look at efficiency numbers, you look at performance numbers, and certainly Tesla's hardware is something to be lauded, but it mostly comes down to the fact that they are a Silicon Valley, not anymore, but effectively Silicon Valley software company. Mm-hmm. And you have these old traditional automakers that have historically shopped out all the software development work to the lowest bidder in foreign countries, and their software's been crap. And so, the average person's experience with infotainment systems in cars is so awful that they try CarPlay and they go, this is fantastic. And I don't even think it's that CarPlay is great. It's just that it's not actively horrible.
Exactly. And that's what I keep telling people. And they're like, you're nuts. And I'm like, no, you just haven't experienced it. Trust me on this. Right.
Yeah. No.
And I think the other thing is you touched on this is the supplier problem, right? Like Tesla uses suppliers, but they dictate every spec on that part. They do the software. They can update a tiny microcontroller in the window motor of your Tesla remotely. They can do that. The Mercedes, you have to bring it to the dealer to actually probably replace that part if something goes wrong with the software. And that's the kind of thing that until the traditional car makers really understand software-defined vehicles in the sense that everything has to be owned by Mercedes or Ford or GM or Volvo or whatever. In the case of Volvo and Polestar, I think actually they're doing it right because they're Chinese companies. Mm-hmm. But until you get there, it's not going to be the same as Tesla. And that makes a huge difference in the user experience. Remember when the Model 3 had kind of poor results in their brake tests with one of the car mags in the early days, and they issued a software update, and all of a sudden they recalibrated the ABS computer and the brake distance was fixed. Yeah. This is unheard of still today, 5 years later, right? So I think that's another thing that Cybertruck benefits from that is even, I think, more pronounced because they probably have simplified the number of modules and software and reliance on suppliers, because in EVs you can have less parts, right?
Yeah, and on one hand, a criticism that most people have towards that approach, and it's understandable, from 10,000 feet, is, well, that just gives automakers more of an excuse to not finish the car before they begin shipping it. And in some respects, that's true. The Rivian, when I bought my first R1T, was not done. The software was not hyper well refined. The hardware was ready, but the rest of the experience wasn't on par. The benefit and the huge distinction that I think is often neglected by people that don't own a software-defined vehicle is that there's iterative improvements over time. When I 100%. Sold my 2018 Model 3 in 2021, it was a better car in every aspect than it was the day I bought it. And that's just unprecedented. It doesn't happen. And if you have teams that are responding to customers' wants and desires, and I think Tesla in the early days certainly did that. I think Rivian is doing that now. You can make a request on Reddit for a feature and it makes it into the car. And Tesla still does that.
That's what I'm saying. They still listen to their customers. Even though Elon is insane, they're still listening to their customers. It's kind of amazing. Yeah. You are 100% right. My 2018 Model 3 was definitely way better in 21 when I traded it in. I mean, when I initially got it in July 2018, autopilot was like a drunken toddler. I didn't let it drive. It was insane, And then within 6 months, I kid you not, it got really good, better than the competition by far, even better than the competition is today. Now, of course, they dropped radar, they dropped the ultrasonic sensors, and I think those are mistakes. But I understand their very, very determined vision. I think it can get there. I don't think you need LiDAR, but at the same time, I think that these relatively affordable parts should be in there. It's just me. Hopefully they'll change their minds. It looks like the Cybertruck has a front bumper camera finally. Will we get, Quinn, a 360 view on the Cybertruck? Something that I really love in other cars, to be frank.
Yeah, I'm shocked they don't have it. Obviously, one of the reasons why they haven't, there's a lot of people that go, well, why don't they just update it to add that? And you're like, well, the camera positioning and the way that they're stitched together and the way that the onboard computer can receive data from them and the color grade. I mean, there's a lot of kind of, potential issues by just taking the cameras you've already got. But especially in a vehicle that large, despite the really good turning radius, the Cybertruck is a big vehicle. And having a 360 view, having perimeter views, one of the things that I most love about my Rivian that I haven't had in any other Tesla, and I'm in a truck, so the sidewalls are really high, but anyone who's driven a Model 3 or Model Y knows how easy it is to curb rash the side of your wheel.
Oh my God,
the Rivian has cameras that point down at the wheels in both front and back on both sides. And so I can pull up to within an inch of a curb because I'm looking at a camera that's staring right down on it. It's so convenient. And I do think, especially in lieu of Tesla removing ultrasonic sensors, speaking of things that they optimize and streamline that I don't always think are a good idea.
That's a bad idea.
They definitely
100%.
need more visual fidelity if they're going to take away the kind of sonic fidelity that was provided previously.
Yeah, I can live without ultrasonic sensors if I have a 360 view. It's basically the bottom line for me.
Yeah, agree.
And that's the mistake right now, is that there's an entire hundreds of thousands of cars out there that don't have that.
Nothing. Yeah.
Nothing. And it's like, it's terrible. The vision stuff, the way they've got implemented is terrible, you know? And I can't believe that the Highland, the updated Model 3 model sold in Europe and Asia right now, doesn't have the front camera. And I really hope ours gets it when it comes to North America. So Cybertruck, the things that I'm excited about is 48 volt architecture.
It's a big deal.
The way they are splitting the battery pack for the high voltage into two 400 volt chunks,
very cool.
And parallel charging them at 400 volts on the old superchargers or the non 800 volt chargers. And then they are supporting 800 volts in series if you want to charge 800 volt. It's so brilliant because that's what smartphone manufacturers do. Like those phones that charge over 80 watts are typically dual battery, dual cell setups that charge in parallel, right? So why did anybody do this before? Why use it even, right?
It becomes increasingly important as well when the capacity of the battery pack increases. I mean, the Cybertruck, we don't know for sure, but it's alleged to be 123 kilowatt hours. That's a big, huge battery. The Rivian, and I'll use this again as an example, this is my biggest complaint with the vehicle. It's not an 800 volt car. It's a standard 400 volt pack. And my battery pack is 135 kilowatt hours. So even though it can sustain a charge rate of 200 plus kilowatts for much longer than any Tesla I ever had could, the downside is that your battery is quite literally twice as capacious. So not only is it 2 times more expensive to fill up, but it's also takes nearly 2 times the amount of time.
And you're carrying that weight around.
Totally.
Right now, it looks like the Cybertruck is lighter than both the Rivian and the Ford Lightning, right?
By almost 1,000 pounds.
The aerodynamics are slightly worse than the Rivian, but better than the F-150, I believe, the CD.
And I would estimate that despite slightly worse CD, I would bet the efficiencies in Tesla's powertrain is going to more than make up for
100%
the extra capacity. I mean, the Rivian, and I use this again as an example, love the car, but it uses a resistive heating element. Rather than
they haven't switched to heat pump yet.
Not yet. They're planning to, but hasn't happened yet. And so in the winter, it's quite cold outside.
Yeah, you're in Utah,
I'm
right?
charging fairly often. Yeah, because it's got to keep the pack at temperature when it's outside, and so it'll lose 2 to 5% a day just sitting in my driveway, which is quite a lot.
One of the main reasons I went to a 21 Model 3 from my 18 was a heat pump because it was resistive before.
Yep.
All-wheel drive as well, and having hardware 2.0
nice.
or whatever, because I wanted better computers.
Sure.
Because eventually, the one thing about Tesla, a lot of people are worried about subscription everything, but Tesla has shown that yes, you can subscribe to FSD and stuff, but and of course the data plan, which is actually really cheap when you think about it.
It is.
By the way, it roams in Canada. I spend half my time in Vancouver and half my time in San Francisco.
Really?
And my car's in Vancouver a lot, and I'm roaming, and they let me roam, and they don't complain, and I'm like gobbling Netflix data on roaming, and they don't care. So
that's cool.
For those of you who have a Tesla, don't be afraid to go to Canada or Mexico. I bet you it'll just work. But to me, I'm very excited about some of these architectural things, like the 48 volt, the steer-by-wire is another thing, right? 48 volt seems like a no big deal initially because some companies have done it partially. Yeah. But doing it fully and kind of defining how it should be done, which is what it seems like they're doing, supposedly sending little PDFs to the other car makers on how to do it, which I don't know if it's true, but it's kind of fun
Ford said they got one, the CEO.
Yeah, but I mean, I think Farley is pretty close to
That's
Elon,
true.
so
Yeah.
they could be just messing with us. Especially, Jason could be in on that too, Camisa, right? Of Haggerty. By the way, I will link to Haggerty video, not because it's like a flamboyant production with a lot of praise, but because he actually talks about the things that are interesting here, that 48-volt system, the steer-by-wire and how different it feels, and the 800-volt architecture. But I'm excited about that more than anything else because I feel like it's more efficient. It's smarter. It's the way we're going to have to go forward with EVs. And yet everybody's kind of like, yeah, but this is going to take a while with our supplies and whatever, so we're not going to do it. And so I think by Tesla doing it, I think they're kind of forcing the hand of the legacy car makers to make 48-volt accessories and parts. And that means now the suppliers are going to make them, which means they're the same supplier Tesla uses, which means Tesla benefits in cost. So it's kind of like they hijacked the whole industry in a way yet again, like they did with supercharging, like they did with other things, right? Like, and a lot of people upset about that, but they should be happy because I think in the long term, it means we get better cars in our driveways. Right?
And they're less expensive. I mean, the cost play is huge. You can't understate that. And yeah, I agree with you that the Cybertruck right now is priced fairly highly, but you mentioned this, you think it'll drop like a rock over time. So do I, because Tesla's demonstrated that they price to demand. And over time, once they figure out how to make the car, and they're just starting to make Cybertruck, so they're going to come out really slowly. But once they've got it down, they can just pump those out so quickly and at such low cost. And they spend every amount of resources they can to reduce the cost of their vehicles, and not to the point where they're crappy, but to the point where nothing that isn't needed is in there to bring the cost as low as they can. And that's why the major complaint against electric vehicles for years has been that they're too expensive. And I mean, look around. You can get into a Model 3 that's in inventory with ignoring the federal tax credit for
39.
Yeah, less than that. There's local ones here that are $35,000, and that's priced with most
nobody
similar.
Can compete with that, guys.
No,
that's the thing. Like a Nissan Leaf is a joke in comparison. Like, no offense to the people who love their Leafs, and it's same with like the Fiat 500e that's coming, right? Like 129 miles for $35,000. Sure, it's cute, it's small, it's fun, but even the specs on it, like the numbers are silly. Like the Model 3 is just going to completely obliterate that thing all day long. Now it's a bigger car. Maybe you want a Mini Cooper SE. I love the Mini Cooper SE. I can't wait for the new one. The original is such a hoot. If you ever get the chance to drive one, Quinn, it's front wheel drive, turn off the traction control, and all you're doing is understeering all day long, like having a total blast. Like if you love front wheel drive hatchbacks, I couldn't believe that I liked it better than the stick shift Cooper S.
Really?
So yeah, and for me, that's like the tall order. I'm a huge stick shift, IC fan in addition to being an EV fan. So anyway, I think people just I kind of think that we as, creators, journalists, tech people that have content channels like you and me, we need to educate the audience as best we can. You do a good job. I try my best. I think that they're not ready. Like I'm in South Carolina right now and I'm looking around and I'm like, people have no idea what's coming, man. It's like they are so like in their own little world of the IC land. Like gas is $2.69 here or something. I was like, what? Yeah. Yep. So, but it's coming. It's inevitable.
It is. And I think, and this is where I think it gets exciting. And Tesla in many ways they created the idea of an electric vehicle that wasn't, ignoring all the environmental factors, even if you're, hyper conservative and you believe global warming's fake and it's going to get to the point where it doesn't matter because electric vehicles are just better. So ignoring the environmental aspect, they're just, if they're the same price and they're more performant, there's no reason to not get one. And I think it's coming. And Tesla in many ways is certainly not, they're not only doing it themselves, but they're forcibly making everyone else follow in their footsteps. And I wish every other automaker wasn't dragging their heels so heavily. Luckily, there's some that are, recommitting, but that's one of the things going back to Chinese EV companies. There's demand for electric vehicles in China like there isn't quite demand yet in the US. And so everybody is making pretty comparable but pretty competitive offerings in Asia because you have to or you die.
Yeah.
And I think Tesla has already begun that kind of descent here in the US. There is demand for them, people want them, and they're just better. So
yeah. And I think the other thing is also ecosystem, generally speaking, like having a charging network, having the maintenance, having the repair for collisions, having insurance support is not there yet, right? Even for Tesla, it's challenging. Like if you have Tesla insurance, for example, in California, they can't ding you for your driving style, so it's actually beneficial. But in some states, they look at your driving data, and as we know, because the vision system is far from perfect, you might get some, sudden deceleration or whatever because, it thinks you're about to hit something when you're not, and it dings you on your insurance rate, and your rate goes up. People have literally written about this and talked about it, and I believe them. And it sucks. This can be improved, but the reality is that in the same way as dealers are kicking and screaming and not wanting to get into EVs, I think body shops are the same because they don't see the money in it. And I think the same with insurance companies. And until the entire system changes, and that's only going to happen when we get, when we reach affordability and basically, ubiquitous charging, which I think is coming. I think that the adoption of NACS in this, I'm talking West here, I'm talking North America particularly, right?
Sure.
But I think with NACS, I think we're there. We're going to be at a point where Tesla is not going to drop the ball on this. They're going to continue building superchargers at the insane rate that they have. As somebody who's owned Tesla for 5.5 years now, I've seen it was good when I started, but now it's insanely good. Yes, there's the occasional times when I have to wait because I'm at a location that's extremely busy, but it's never more than 5 minutes and it's never been an issue for me. So I think they're going to continue growing the network and then the rest of the cars are going to be on it. And then the other networks are going to feel the pressure, hopefully, and follow suit, right?
Yep. I agree. I mean, will they? Let's see.
Will they?
But I think they will. I think they have to because there's no other option. I don't think, anyone, certainly not other automakers, want Tesla to have a monopoly on charging. And them opening up their network to everyone else, theoretically, still has to happen, but is exciting because I think one of the reasons Electrify America and EVgo and many of the other charging providers sucked is because what other option did you have?
Right. They had no pressure.
And now there is.
Now there's competition. So hopefully it'll change. So as you notice, folks, we really haven't talked much about the Cybertruck, but that's actually on purpose because the whole point of this is that the Cybertruck, I think, more than anything else, it's not just a new Tesla that looks crazy and it's just manufacturing techniques, 48 volt, steer by wire, the range extender thing, which it could be an entire podcast of its own.
Right.
Stuff like that. It is opening up Pandora's box even more. It's upending the industry even more. You might not see it yourself on your everyday life, but I'm telling you right now, the rest of the car world is studying this very, very closely. And if they're not, they're effed.
Yeah.
Right?
No, they really are. And if the Cybertruck isn't for you, and it isn't for many people, all of these technologies are going to cascade down, not just through the rest of Tesla's lineup, but through the rest of the industry. So the Cybertruck is good. No matter how you slice it, it's a good thing for EVs and for everyone. Yeah.
That's exactly right. So final thoughts. Let's quickly touch on steer-by-wire. I think for me, I'm fine with the idea. Apparently there's force feedback on the wheel. So it'd be really interesting to see how that plays if it transmits vibrations or something when, and then the other thing is, again, you and I will have to experience to see what it really is like to be, whether we like it or not. I think because it's completely software controlled, it can be calibrated to do anything. So in the same way as, early electric motor calibration was a challenge for some companies, although Tesla really nails it still today. I get in some EVs and I'm like, seriously, the front motors are not talking to the rear motors. What are you guys doing? Right.
Yeah.
But I think that hopefully that can be tweaked as it goes anyway. But it's fascinating to me that you can really only turn to 179 degrees on each direction. Like, wow, that's going to take some getting used to. But hey, why not?
I think
Let's
it's
get
really
started.
cool.
Oh, look at that. You've got continuity up and you did a thumbs up and it popped up. Do it again.
Oh, hey.
There you go.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really cool. The other thing that is, that Steer by Wire achieves is that for the first time ever, Elon's desire, whether it be rational or not, for a yoke actually isn't blatantly
ridiculous.
Problematic. Yeah. If you can only spin, basically 360 lock to lock, you can have a taco sized steering wheel and make it work. So that should be cool, especially with the rear wheel steering and a vehicle that big. I agreed with, Jason Camisa's kind of conclusion that it's probably not something he's going to want on a sports car to take up the canyon, but for a truck, it's probably awesome.
100%. What's your quick thoughts on the range extender? Because we really know nothing about it. I really hope it can be something you can just swap quickly. Like that would be really cool. If you
that
just
would be cool, but I don't see how that's going to be the case because you've got to have cooling. Obviously you've got the power leads, which are enormously large, and then if it is the capacity that it needs to be, which is about, I think we did the math a little while back. It's anywhere from basically 35 to 45 kilowatt hours. That's 800 to 1,000 pounds. So I think it'll be something that you stick in there and it's just stuck in there. It's interesting, but to me, it very much seems like I think Tesla thought their battery chemistry, especially with the new cells that they were working on, was going to be a lot more. Yeah. And then they were like, okay, well, we can't release the vehicle without the ability to go at least somewhere near the range we promised. And this was kind of a last minute solution to get that out the door. And I think proof of that is the fact that beyond a render, they don't seem to really know anything about it.
As far as I'm concerned. I know enough about Tesla that I'm not delusional. This is right. I'll see it when I see it hooked up to a Cybertruck and I see the range number change up there. Cool. Let's switch gears and talk about Beeper Mini for a little bit.
Sure.
So you did an incredible video, like, wow, on Beeper Mini. Look, I worked with Eric Michikowski. I know, disclosure, I was the head of communications at Pebble in the days of the crowdfunding.
Right, I forgot that. I didn't know that.
So I've known Eric for a long time. He's a super clever guy, super talented. He always surrounds himself with great people. And so anyway, I am excited about what they've been doing with Beeper Cloud, the existing platform. But, there's always that, like I'm pretty security savvy and I'm kind of very concerned about giving my Apple ID to anyone, even though it might run on a Mac Mini somewhere in the cloud. Now, of course, you could set it up to run on your own computer, right? But this is brilliant. You're basically they hacked or reverse engineered, and I believe that's legal to do if the purpose is to improve interoperability, right? Which is what the DCMA says. So they've done that by reverse engineering the iMessage registration of a phone number, right? Basically, is what they did.
Yeah, I've heard a couple things, not very known information. Apparently, the ability to register a number directly was kind of discovered as a bug.
Oh,
it wasn't supposed to be the intended behavior, but they figured out how to do it. Yeah, and that's kind of how the whole system. I think it was at that point that they were like, okay, let's reframe this and try and see if we can make this something viable and marketable. It's certainly exciting in the sense that you're not sending off your credentials to some random entity. It's locally stored on your device. Now, this does bring into question a lot of potential, not just legal exposure, as you mentioned. They feel pretty confident in the DMCA's protections, and while reverse engineering is likely legal and protected, forcibly using Apple's servers for free likely is not.
Right, and I don't see Apple being too happy about that. But I also think there is a big war going on right now. You see that on Threads and on Twitter.
Yeah,
I'm still on Twitter because I kind of have to, not because I want to be, and I'm certainly not a blue check. I used to be, but back when it meant something else. But the point I'm making is that right now, some people are like, well, why we don't want the Android people on our iMessage threads, like they're being very exclusive. And then some people are like, this is hurting the Apple community, right? Not having, and I'm of that camp. I'm like, look, it's not just hurting the Android users, it's hurting the Apple users that want to interact with the Android users. And you shouldn't have to force us to use a different platform. So this is beneficial. And I'm not sure how Apple sees it, because Apple so far has pretty much been looking at, we want to sell more devices, especially to young people, right?
Totally.
I think that's true. Like, I don't want to be mean to Apple because, they don't give me a review in it anyway. But my point is, I like their products. I'm a big Mac user. I'm not an iPhone user, though, or an Apple Watch. I'm more of an Android user. But I like what they do. It's been short-sighted to me since day one with iMessage, what they've done. The way they engineered it, I thought was kind of bad. I think that a data-driven messaging system is awesome. Like, that's fine. And, WhatsApp does it, WeChat does it, Line in Japan, Asia, and then we have, what else do we have? Telegram, Signal. That's fine. But the fact that it's so closely attached to your phone number in such a way that you're breaking a standard, you're breaking MMS and SMS, even though those are crap, but you're also breaking RCS, even though Apple is going to join that. Like, there's all these issues with it, which from day one, I was very upset about. And I feel like it was just driven by making the user experience for Android users poor, but also for Apple users who communicate with Android users poor, so that they would switch to Apple. And I don't like that, Apple.
I agree. I think to give them the benefit of the doubt, I think it's spiraled. If you go back to around the time that iMessage debuted, WhatsApp was still fairly new. Now, that's not to say it wasn't popular. They had hundreds of millions of users, but it was still fairly new. The idea of moving off of SMS was a foreign concept. Certainly, I think, to the American-based Apple, because SMS had become so ubiquitous in the United States, where it hadn't in many other regions, because it was just built into cell phone plans. We had SMS for free, and so it became the norm by default.
Exactly.
You move to web-based messaging, which I agree comes with a huge number of improvements. And over time, one of the reasons that iMessage is so attractive to people who are in the Apple ecosystem, and this is something that's not often understood by people who use WhatsApp or alternate platforms, is that because Apple has complete vertical control of the platform and the messaging system, it's hyper well integrated. And so the native messaging app on Mac and iPad, and the idea that it can pass off, not just messages, but phone calls and everything so seamlessly, is really, really elegant in a way that I'm not sure could be achieved even with proper APIs utilizing third-party software. And I think Apple's probably rationale at the time was, and if I were Apple, I would be in the same place, is something along the lines of, well, why would we forfeit the opportunity to kind of control messaging, at least in the United States, if the alternative is just going to Facebook or another company? 100%. I think they would. Yeah. The problem obviously came 10, 15 years later, nearly, when, hey, we've had this for a while. It's only become further divided. And there was multiple opportunities for Apple to fix iMessage. And it pivoted from this is a technological reason that we're doing something to get around the standard. It changed to, hey, this sells phones and we're going to keep using this to our advantage. And that's where I think they're wrong. Unfortunately
100%.
for them, they're now in a no-win situation. I mean, they really have three options when it comes to Beeper, right? Either one, Beeper doesn't really get that popular. And if it's a paid app, which it is, I think that's potentially true. And Apple kind of just ignores it and let it, they're not going to try to not break it, but they're also not going to intentionally try to stop it from working. It's like Hackintoshes. We know it's there. We don't love it, but whatever. Option number two is they do try to intentionally break it. And I think that's going to look quite poorly on them. Of course, they can use, security and blah, blah, blah as an excuse, but they are up against increasing scrutiny globally, not even just from the EU. And if they're trying to argue that their messaging platform is not a monopoly, blocking a third party from using it is not a great way to prove
it's
that. It's not
a good look.
Right?
Yeah,
No.
I think you're right. They're probably going to try to wait for it to fester away, which with all respect to Eric and the crew, is very possible. Like, look,
It's likely.
right now, I haven't even tried it simply because I don't even have iMessage turned on my iPhone because it's not my main phone. And I'd like to try it, but I'm kind of like, this is me surrendering. We need RCS encrypted on iPhone. That's what we really need, right? Like, and that's never going to happen, at least not until it becomes a GSM standard, GSMA standard, because they're not going to use Google's, encryption setup.
Right.
So, but I'm kind of like resisting, not because I think it's actually really great, but I'm just like, And so they could let it fester, or they could really be smart and completely like blow the whole thing out by doing a equivalent price iMessage for Android version.
That would be option number 3.
And then it would be possibly the best solution for everyone. They make money. It's still an Android app, so it's probably not quite as good. It might be not supporting the games, for example, and stuff like that.
Yep.
But at least, I don't know. Let's see what happens, right?
No, I totally agree. And hell, instead of make it comparably priced, I would say make it free. The reality is that when there's a good experience with a product or service, it encourages users when they come to a purchasing decision again to consider something else. If Apple had a really great iMessage app for Android, I don't think it would pull iPhone users away from the iPhone towards Android. I think it would do the inverse. It would encourage some Android people to move to an iPhone. So I don't think it would hurt them at all in that way. Additionally, and this is something that Eric kind of talked about extensively that I didn't really consider on the offset, is that it improves the experience for iPhone users.
Exactly.
Apple's
That's the big deal.
refusal to support Android hasn't just been bad for Android users. It's made half of all the messages that iPhone users send to other users in the United States insecure and frustrating, and there's no ability to share location, and media is horrible, and you send a video and it's 12 pixels. It's a crappy experience. And so by offering that to people that are Android users, it makes Apple's own users more happy. And I think the perception that has kind of been created by this green bubble thing is, Android phones suck because, they don't have the ability to message like a normal phone. It's like, no. You guys are the ones that don't have the ability to, and I think it's good for everyone. And the only market where Apple really has any dominance and control is North America, and even less so North America, mostly the United States and part of Canada.
Correct.
Mexico is mostly a WhatsApp country. And so, the jig's up. They've already lost. And so why not just try to create a good experience that, if better than everything else, might even encourage regions where WhatsApp is the standard to try something else. I don't think Telegram, I don't think Signal, even though I think they're both great apps, have the pull to bring people away from WhatsApp. And I think iMessage actually might.
100%.
And so why not do it?
And the reason I was suggesting they charge a small fee is because they're trying to monetize their services. Apple is really being huge on that. And look, as much as it drives me nuts sometimes too, I don't actually pay for iCloud storage because I don't really use that interoperability between my Apple devices as much as most people do. And I don't store that much on my iPhone. But if I did, I totally would. My spouse does. But the point is, I get the services thing, and that's why I think that would be a reasonable thing for them to say, well, if they're charging $2, maybe we'll undercut them and do like, $1. I mean, I don't know, or nothing.
Or include it with an iCloud subscription, and if you pay for the iCloud, we can sync it to your other devices or something like that. Or
how
about
if you pay for
Apple Music included
Apple TV
on
Plus for a discount,
something like that. Yeah.
There we go.
And they're all about that services revenue. So if they bundle it in with an Apple One subscription, or, hey, you're an Android user, we notice you pay for Apple Music because that is an app available on Android. There you go. You get iMessage for free.
Oh, that's a good one. I like that. Listen, Phil, are you paying attention? Phil's retired, right?
Yeah, Phil's retired.
Phil's retired.
Probably be, I don't know, the money guy's still kind of Tim and software guy's Craig. So,
Craig.
Tell
Listen.
Tim.
Yeah. I mean, I was a little alarmed when, Tim said, buy your mom an iPhone, because I'm like, seriously, dude, like I get it. Like, you can buy an iPhone SE2 or 3 or whatever it is now, the 5G model, for really cheap, like relatively speaking, for $450 or whatever it is. It's actually a really great deal. You
Right.
get all of the iPhone goodness for a really good price. Yeah, it's not competitive with like a Pixel 7a or something,
No.
but whatever. Who cares? Nobody's going to buy a Pixel 7a over an iPhone SE if they're looking at buying an iPhone, right? That's the reality.
And that's where I'm most frustrated about Tim's statement is it's clear that at least at that point in time, and things have perhaps changed, but I don't think so. I think it's a response to regulatory pressure. And if the only reason Apple is doing things that benefits consumers is because they're being forced to, that's a really crappy way to encourage people to purchase your products. And so I hope that attitude goes away because it doesn't benefit anyone, certainly not Apple.
It's poisoning the Apple culture, in my opinion, which is already pretty contentious.
Pretty bad.
And this is from somebody who is a long time Mac user. I love Apple for many reasons.
Sure.
I just never got into iOS, guys. Okay. Like, I totally validate anyone who uses an iPhone out there. It's an incredible phone. I recommend it all the time. I just bought a 15 Pro Max this year after being on an 11 for 4 years. I get it. But look, it needs to end. We can't be like that. So yeah, Beeper Mini, good stuff from Eric and his team. Congratulations. I am excited about it. And I think everyone listening should watch Quinn's video. It is so in-depth, so cool.
Oh, thank you.
There's Linux stuff going on. Like, come on, guys. Like, command line. We got it all. Like, it was I felt like you were like it was as entertaining as it was interesting. In terms of like the nerd content, the tech content. Yeah, I think nobody can make.
Thank you.
Like you won that battle, Quinn. Like you got the best Beeper Mini video, period.
I appreciate it.
I think Michael Fisher, we were just talking, Mr. Mobile and he was like, damn, Quinn, And I was like, yeah, dude, you should have done your video sooner. So, but it's all good. Let's talk about the OnePlus 12 that's finally official now.
Yeah. No
surprises here. A lot of that stuff had leaked, but what I'm kind of interested about is the fact that, the OnePlus 11 was a good phone, but it purposely made some omissions, right? Like to kind of reach a price point, like no wireless charging was my biggest issue. But like also you looked at the camera systems and it was good, but it wasn't like S23 Ultra or iPhone 14 Pro Max at the time, kind of competitive. It was a step down in the flagship line, kind of like an iPhone 14 would be, right? Or S23 regular would be.
Yeah.
This thing, to me, screams, yeah, we're giving you the full beans. And I'm wondering how much you're going to be able to sell this here at a reasonable price, especially now that they no longer have carrier support.
Right.
I mean, they still have carrier support, like on the Nord N series, their US, budget mid-range phones. But what's your take on the specs on this and how it's going to be relevant to us when we get it in January, it looks like now?
Yeah, I don't know. OnePlus has been confusing to me for a few years because they had that intense kind of loyalist enthusiast market that for a few years it kind of seems they neglected in order to hit budgets that their market had kind of accepted. It went from a really inexpensive phone back in the early days to a little bit less than other phones, but not that much. But it was fine because the software was excellent, the hardware was solid, and there were no obvious downsides to purchase it over anything else. And, I used the OnePlus 11 for the better part of a week.
I did notice that.
Beeper. So I've got it on my desk. I just moved back to an iPhone.
Open, it's an 11.
Yeah, this is an 11. I just I got it earlier this year. One of the reasons why is it's one of the few devices that exists right now with Wi-Fi 7. I've got and I've got the new Aero Max Pro 7, whatever they're called. That's insane. I can get multi-gigabit Wi-Fi through this device, which is so cool. So there are aspects of it that are still very much flagship, but I agree. The cameras were fine, not great. No wireless charging. I forgot that was a thing. I went to put it on top of my charger at night, and I was like, what is wrong? Why is this not? And then I thought, wait, does this not have it?
Right, exactly.
Surely.
I'm like, the 10 Pro had it, the 9 Pro had it. It just doesn't have Pro, but surely it must have it. And even though I read the reviewer's guide, they sent it, I reviewed it under embargo for Hot Hardware. And I was just like, wait a minute, like, really? Kind of like you. I'm like, am I missing something here? And then, so sad.
And the hole punch in the top left corner, I don't like it there. I prefer it in the middle, which it looks like the 12 has put it right back where it belongs.
Yep.
There's a lot of complaints that I've seen from people that I don't really agree with, especially with the 12, because the design hasn't fundamentally changed that much.
Correct.
Is that it looks dated and old because it hasn't followed the trend set by the iPhone to move back to square. And I couldn't disagree more. I think it's a fantastic feeling phone in terms of, the hand feel and the way they etch the back glass. It's second to none. I mean, the fit and finish on OnePlus phones has always been good, but the 11 is fantastic. And so if they can bring back wireless charging, 50 watts no less, which sounds super cool, potentially super hot, but super cool.
Well, they're going to have fans in the rapid chargers that they did that before. I remember the OnePlus 8 Pro and 9 Pro both had a wireless charging base with a built-in fan. Yeah. That was their VOOC, whatever charging base, right?
Yep.
But look, I think for me, like nothing surprises me. 8 Gen 3, of course, it's got a beautiful display. That's one of the brightest in the industry at 4,500 nits peak, which is
I think that
searing
is the brightest in the
We're going to bleed
yeah.
when we look at that thing.
Yeah,
and we
cool.
It's good though. But the camera system is pretty much straight off of the Open, which I don't know if you followed, but that is a freaking awesome camera system for an Android phone, especially coming from OnePlus. We know Oppo can do it, but OnePlus has never really delivered that level of performance. So I'm impressed with that. And of course, that the Chinese software right now is not going to be super great, but once we get ours, it'll be, Oxygen OS, just the stuff we're used to on the OnePlus 11 right now. So I think this should be a great phone to recommend to people. The big question mark for me right now is how is it going to be priced, and how successful is it going to be in the end? Because if without carrier support, it's kind of DOA, and I hate to say that, right?
Yeah. No, that is the, the kind of concern. It's almost like they're moving back to the enthusiast approach for the West, as it were. Kind of like the olden days where, they sold a smaller number of units to people in, North America, and, they still kind of have their stronghold on Europe and Asia, obviously, but, it'll be interesting to see. And the price too. I mean, on the higher end spec model, you've got 24 gigs of memory, which is insane.
That's very much a China thing, though. I mean, I'm not sure we'll get it that high here. Might get 16. Although, the Open shipped with 16 as a base, which is a lot. Pretty impressive. Yeah. But then it has to multitask on that bigger screen, internal screen.
That's true.
I really like this phone. I miss the lack of wireless charging on the Open, but it's the first book-style folding phone where I've really felt like I can be comfortable using. Yeah. I've never really been a fan of the Samsung Galaxy Z Fold series. Yeah. I don't know why. It's just I've reviewed most of them, and they never stuck. No, I'm a Pixel user primarily, so maybe that's why.
It could be. I think form factor is a big one. I had the original Z Fold. Well, not the original. I had the Z Fold 2, and then I swapped that for a Z Fold 5. So I have the 5 now, the latest generation, and I actually tried to use it for an afternoon to try Beeper Mini, and I got frustrated because both displays are kind of not the right aspect ratio.
Exactly.
And so apps really, and it was really highlighted to me that when it's closed, it's not that comfortable of a form factor. And when it's open, it's obviously nice, but not every app scales well, particularly with, Instagram is a good example where because of the aspect ratio of the display, you can see precisely one photo at a time. And because Instagram isn't that high resolution on that large of a display, it looks terrible. And so, you can run it in 9:16, but at that point, why use a folding phone? And so I think the form factor of the OnePlus Open and frankly the Pixel Fold are much more in line with what makes sense for most people.
But the Pixel Fold, as much as a Pixel fan myself, love the cameras, for example. You've got the disastrous tensors in there, and I'm sorry, it's still a disaster, even on Tensor G3. It's not. It's better, but it's still not great. And the problem is that they really haven't optimized the software for the inner display much. And I think this is where somehow Oppo/OnePlus has managed to make the inner screen, the large screen software experience on the Open just so much better than anything else. And I think that's where it differentiates. So I'm hoping that on the 12, they managed to price it. Like, this is definitely spec-wise an S23 Ultra competitor.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure.
Or S24 Ultra. And so I hope it's not $1,200. I hope it's like $999 or something. That would just nail it. It still wouldn't sell in volumes because of the carrier stuff.
Right.
But I think it would bring OnePlus back into the fold, as it were, because they have kind of, the 11 was such a great effort, but it just didn't quite get there, right?
Yep.
And then now they're riding on the coattails of all of us nerds reviewing the Open, right? Everybody's like, the Open is the best thing since sliced bread,
Yeah.
So hopefully it works out for them.
Agree.
So we should probably wrap up. I've got a whole bunch more, but you know what? We'll keep that for next week, because I'm so glad we went nuts on the Cybertruck and all that stuff, because it's hard to teach people this stuff. They don't get a chance to experience it like we do.
Sure.
And until you have a Tesla or something like it that has this vertically integrated ecosystem-based approach, it's hard to wrap your head around why that's so important. But once you've lived with it, like, again, I'm visiting family in the South right now. Got a rental Nissan Altima.
Hey.
Big Altima energy here, although it's in really good shape. But man, like, I feel like I time traveled 15 years. Okay. Like, it's not a pan on Nissan. This is a relatively nice car. It does everything right for like an appliance, but it's like, I'm like technologically thinking like, this is prehistoric compared to even the legacy EVs that I've driven from Ford and Mercedes, for example, right?
Sure.
And I think if you live in that world every day, if you jump in your RAV4 and CRV and go from point A to point B, you don't see that. But you live with a Model 3 or Model Y for a while, assuming you have a good experience with charging, which I think you will with superchargers, you will be like, why would I go back to anything else? Right?
And there's a reason most people don't.
And those who do, I think most of them are folks that have had EVs from legacy manufacturers and don't have the charging experience.
Not a good experience. Yep.
So Cybertruck is a good thing, not in the way you think, right?
Right. Yep.
You might not like it. And yes, it's Tesla. And yes, it comes with all that baggage and Elon and everything else. But it's going to change the game. It's going to push the industry yet another step forward, which I think is what I want to celebrate here.
Agree. I'm right there with you.
Awesome. Well, Quinn, listen, tell the folks here on the show where they can find you on social media. Tell them about your YouTube channel, whatever other project you might be working on. Cool stuff. Let us know.
Sure. On all social media, you can find me at SnazzyQ, save for on Twitter. I will not call it the other name. You can find me. You can find me at Snazzy Labs over there, and then you can see my YouTube stuff by just searching Snazzy Labs or going to youtube.com/snazzy.
And folks, subscribe if you haven't yet. I will link to your Beeper mini video, so folks, look at the show notes, click through, and subscribe if you haven't. You know where to find me, folks. I'm at Tankgirl, TNKGRL, on all the social pretty much. That's Twitter, Threads, Insta, and Blue Sky for some reason. I don't know how that happened, but hey, it's okay. I've got a little audience over there. Why not? So check me out and chat with me and Quinn on these various social media channels about this podcast if you'd like. If you have some strong opinions, we'd like to hear them. The podcast is at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on all the big podcasting platforms. That's Google, Apple, Spotify, Pocket Cast. If you like that up, it's great, I think. Others. There's also an RSS feed there if you're old school and you want to aggregate the traditional way. My YouTube channel is youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast. It's not remotely in the same league as Quinn's or any of my guests most of the time, but you'll find some video content that's free there, like unboxings and hands-on videos of random phones that I get my hands on or cars or whatever. I try to publish like at least once a month, so check it out. And then I have a Patreon. So if you want to help me out, you saw us brandish some phones earlier on video. If you're already on Patreon, The big thing on the Patreon is a video version of the podcast. Comes out a couple of days in advance. You get to see our faces. I sometimes keep like bloopers in there and other outtakes and stuff. So it's kind of fun. Check it out. If you can help me, that'd be great. It's patreon.com/tankerl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. And don't worry, there's other perks there. So check it out. Help me out if you can. And if you prefer doing a donation in another way, there's a PayPal link in the show notes. Click through, buy me a coffee or whatever. Topo Chico. Not sponsored. I just kind of happen to like their water, and since I'm in the South, they have a lot of that here. So yeah, help me out if you can, and also consider my sponsor, Mint Mobile. So as you know, I'm constantly reviewing multiple phones, and while that's fun, it also means I'm constantly spending a lot of money for wireless service on multiple SIMs. That's where Mint Mobile comes in, and that's who I'm partnering with for today's podcast. If you also want to save money on your wireless service, switch to Mint Mobile. As tech-savvy early adopters, you've probably heard of Mint Mobile before, but let me quickly tell you how awesome their service is. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network. They keep costs low because they sell direct to you online. They cut out the retail stores and salespeople. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? In my experience testing phones, Mint Mobile delivers the same data speeds and call quality as the big three for a fraction of the cost. Switching to Mint is super easy. Thanks to their eSIMs, you can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. No more standing around and waiting in line at a big wireless store. You can keep your current device and phone number and easily switch services. And if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint will ship you a new SIM free of charge. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, lightning fast 5G, and free mobile hotspot. Mint will show you how much data you use each month and recommend plans that save you money. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. Use my link mintmobile.com/mobiletech to get premium wireless starting for $15 a month. That's mintmobile.com/mobiletech. Stop paying more than you need on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile. And I want to thank you, Quinn, for being my guest this week. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you, Miriam.
I will have you on at some point in the future. And of course, folks, we'll have another show next week. So stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.